Hello, good afternoon, everyone. This is Borawet Cholasins, the Executive Director of AIT Extensions. And today we organize a webinar series again at AIT Extensions in close collaboration with the UNITAS and CIFAR networks. And one of the important hosts today, one of the important co-hosts with AIT Extension today is Special Olympics Asia Pacific. And we are really excited to have our speaker today to speak to you, to share your ideas with a very unique topics that will be a lot of learning and also benefit to the audience today, that we believe, because this thing is beyond social inclusion. It is also beyond leaving no one behind, but it is something that we want to share with you on not to missing millions. And you will know the story about the approach, the activities that the Special Olympics Asia Pacific is doing in order to contribute and also to help the people, who are, have the intellectual disabilities through funds, sports, activities that can be one of the means that people can explore how to really contribute to the SDGs, and especially for helping people that are in the special need. So AIT Extension is very honored today that we have a speaker from the Special Olympics Asia Pacific, Mr. Deepak Natali. And Deepak is the Regional Director, Regional President of the Special Olympics, and also he is the MD of the Special Olympics Asia Pacific. He has a lot of experience in working with NGOs in different countries, in Singapore, in other places of the world. And through his experience working with the Special Olympics and also interaction with different countries, different host countries in these activities, he will share a lot of information that we believe are very, very good for us, good for you, good for everyone, so that we can crack this, in the topic, which is, Deepak want to share with you on the topics called Breaking Barriers, Reducing Inequalities through Sports and Inclusive Practice. Now, Deepak, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chonasin. Hello, everybody, and thank you all for joining us today to hear about Special Olympics. I'd firstly, of course, like to thank everyone at AIT, to CIFAL, and to UNITA for this opportunity to speak with you. It's a wonderful privilege for us to be able to talk about not only our work, but what inclusion really means for people with intellectual disabilities. And that's something I think that often we don't get enough opportunity to do, and I'll talk more about why that is the case. Firstly, I'd like to start by saying there's a few things today which I will be doing. One of which is to show several films, short videos on different aspects of what inclusion looks like to us. At the same time, I do want to share as much as I can about the approach we take, and I felt that this was the important thing for this webinar today. It looks very much at how we can reduce inequalities through sport and inclusive practice, but also really looks at why that takes place in the way it does, what the methodology is behind that. So I hope this is going to be of interest to everybody, and certainly I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions at the end of the session. Okay. Okay, so I really do enjoy showing that film because I think it represents an aspect of our work which is incredibly important, a sports event. It shows what sport and competition are all about. It shows those things, the culmination of hard work, of dedication, of challenging oneself. And I think that's a really important principle around which Special Olympics is founded. However, at the same time, I think it's really important to demonstrate and to for everyone to understand that this is only one small aspect of the work that we do. In reality, Special Olympics is not about an event. It isn't about staging a large event. It's about looking at the development of people with intellectual disabilities and ending discrimination against them, which is something which is prevalent today. Um, we are a global inclusion movement that uses sport primarily as a conduit to provide health and education and leadership development opportunities. Through that, we look to change attitudes towards intellectual disabilities, and we do that currently in over 190 countries worldwide. Many of you may not know very much about intellectual disability. Those of you that do, then forgive me for going through this very quickly, but I think it is important. It's a term used very much to describe someone who has certain limitations in cognitive learning. These limitations can manifest themselves in different ways and cause a person to develop and learn more slowly or differently. But the important thing to remember is that people with intellectual disabilities are simply unique, and that's just like anybody in the world. They take their own avenue towards learning, and we have to be respectful of that. Um, from a medical standpoint, you're looking at someone who has an IQ below 70, and that means that they may sometimes find it difficult to make certain judgments. They may have challenges in cognitive skills, social skills, practical skills, or a combination of any three of those. What it really means is that they take many more steps, or maybe a few more steps, or just take a different approach to learning. It's estimated that in the world, there's about 2.3% of the world's population have an intellectual disability, and it makes it one of the largest disability populations in the world. What that translates to in the Asia Pacific region is about 54 million people with intellectual disabilities, which I'm sure you would agree is a um, significant population within our community. However, disabled people, including people with intellectual disabilities, are 49% more likely to never have attended school and three times more likely to be bullied. Um, in addition to that, people with intellectual disabilities from our own health screening research that we've conducted are five times more likely to have diabetes. Now, these are just some of the indicators that we use, and as you can see, that demonstrates, I hope, to you all that this is a very marginalized community that we're talking about. So even though people with intellectual disabilities are a significant population, they face incredible social, cultural, and political barriers that really do create a stigma that prevents them from reaching their full potential. So, with that in mind, Special Olympics very much works with the idea that if we provide high quality sport experiences alongside avenues towards inclusive healthcare and leadership and skills development opportunities that bring people with and without intellectual disabilities together, we can create inclusive mindsets that will improve not only communities but organizations. And through that, we create inclusive environments which can help people with intellectual disabilities to achieve that full potential I just mentioned. Ultimately, what that will do is help us to achieve an inclusive world. And we believe that that is the way for us to create a series of outcomes which not only improve the physical, social, and emotional well-being of people with ID, not only contribute to significantly more opportunities from a personal development and a socio-economic standpoint, creating a knowledge base of awareness around the needs of this marginalized community, but it also will mean that organizations and people without disabilities will behave more inclusively. Now, we see that as an avenue to really uh, pr- um, progressing towards a variety of the different sustainable development goals, and certainly towards the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This work towards inclusion focuses on reducing inequalities. It focuses on good health and well-being, quality education, and decent work and employment. And those are really some of the significant aspects I will talk about today. So I wanted to show very quickly this flowchart diagram of our of a journey of a Special Olympics athlete. Today, I will focus very much on talking about how we address exclusion and isolation of marginalized communities through sport. I will talk about inclusive play and about what it means to children and how sport and play come together. I will talk about health and well-being in particular, really looking at what some of the health issues are that people with intellectual disabilities face, and therefore how inclusion can have an impact on that. Inclusive practice can have an impact on that. And then we'll talk about inclusive practices in schools and work and inclusive education and what the value of that is. My final piece will really be about talking about how we engage the community. For me, that's about addressing discrimination through advocacy. And the people to advocate would be people with intellectual disabilities themselves. And that speaks very much to leaving no one behind. So, starting with sport as an outreach tool, sport and competition itself, it generates passion. It's a human trait to be competitive. And that excitement, that passion that we feel is something that is felt universally. Sport also creates a common ground through which people bond and they can celebrate skills of each other. Inclusive sports in particular creates a safe space where everyone can feel valued and contribute with unique skills. Now, in Special Olympics, all three of those components are incredibly important. As they are the things that drive our ability to engage people with intellectual disabilities in the first place. Given that they are so marginalized, it is incredibly challenging to be able to get people with intellectual disabilities to engage with direct services such as healthcare, which I'll come on to in a little while, or indeed education systems. So for us, sport is a conduit to really being able to not only engage people with intellectual disabilities, but map them and be able to find out ways that they can be supported. So I'm going to now show you a short video. This is of an athlete in Pakistan. Her name is Sana. And I think hopefully you'll see through this some of the principles I'm talking about here.
अरे बांध के क्यों रखा हुआ?
निकल के जाती है।
हाँ, जाओ गांव में एक बाढ़ भाग जाती है
तो मारते हैं, ऐसे झगड़ा करते हैं, फिर वो हमको किस्ते में से पागल हो जाती है जो बस।
हाँ, नहीं इतनी प्यारी बच्ची है ये तो, इतनी प्यारी है।
दिमाग सही नहीं है।
दिमाग सही नहीं है, किसने कहा? आप हमारे साथ गेमों में जाएगी, ठीक है? और इतनी सारी सहेलियां बनाएगी, इतने सारे लोगों के साथ बातें करेगी। इसमें मुंह झुका के नहीं, मुंह उठा के। देखो 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 उसको, वो कह रही है ना रो।
सना जंप करो जैसा वहाँ करती हो ना। यस 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 यस, वेरी गुड। तो एक्सरसाइज करेंगे तो फिर हम कराची भी जाएंगे।
Sana, Special Olympics, Pakistan.
सारी सहेलियां बनाएगी, इतने सारे लोगों के साथ बातें करेगी, इस तरह मुंह झुका के नहीं, मुंह उठा के।
और दूसरा कि जब ये आगे जाएंगी
You will run faster. You will swim faster. You will jump and throw farther than most of us in the stands ever will dream of doing. You are the true champions, and we are proud of you.
Now, what I think is really important to recognize about that film in particular is how sport, as a regular part of anyone's life, can really support them to actually be something which they can use to then take on different aspects of development within them. So for us, we can support people with intellectual disabilities, having been engaged, as you see Sana there, having been in an environment where she is completely ostracized, not only by her local community, but indeed by several members of her family too. You see her being able to take part in sport, and that then allowing her to look at different ways to speak for herself, engage in wider community engagement, and develop skills that she would otherwise not have. Beyond that, really, we are there to use sport as a way to provide health and well-being support as well. With that in mind, health challenges for people with intellectual disability are incredibly significant. We've done healthcare screenings for many years, and as part of that, we know that on average, out of 10 people with intellectual disabilities, these are the statistics that they face. 2 have never had an eye exam, 2 would fail a hearing test, and 6 will have problems with flexibility, or just some of the health conditions that they exhibit. Now, why that happens really is down to the fact that there is insufficient training for healthcare professionals in general. Attitudes towards them and discrimination are quite prevalent, even within healthcare. And often there is diagnostic overshadowing. That's where we're talking about the fact that they have an intellectual disability prevents them from being diagnosed with other underlying conditions that might well be there. What then that leads to is exacerbated health problems in the future for them. We recognize that the fact that they often can't speak for themselves and there is little recognition of how medically underserved they are, it can have a detrimental impact on the healthcare provision that can be provided to them. So, in terms of being able to look at what equitable healthcare access looks like, it really does speak to inclusive practice. The first step for us is about talking about sensitizing and training healthcare professionals to treat people with intellectual disabilities, to understand that they may be sensitive to certain actions or might need to go through certain steps in terms of what a healthcare professional might need to do in order that they might be able to see them and diagnose them effectively. So a good example of this would be in an eye test, instead of using letters which they may not understand, to use pictures and symbols so that they can actually speak to the things that they would be able to communicate alongside when looking at that. Or indeed, when it comes to dental care, often we find that people with intellectual disabilities, like so many of us, are quite frightened to see a dentist simply because it's about sitting down in a reclining chair, opening your mouth and actually having to let someone poke around inside. Now, if you're a person with intellectual disabilities and haven't understood what is going to happen, that can be a daunting process. So we do a lot of work sensitizing dentists to being able to see what they could do to actually explain in more detail what they are going to be undertaking as a procedure. That can often involve things like using a teddy bear to put them in a doll's chair and turn it back to say, this is what we're going to do with you, and then we're going to open your mouth and so on. That type of training is critical. In addition, strengthening local capacity for inclusive health is something that needs to happen. So that's really about looking at healthcare institutions, looking at healthcare ministries, and about how mainstream health systems can be sensitized to people with intellectual disabilities. And that speaks very much to the third strategy here, which is about improving the opportunity for people with intellectual disabilities to speak for themselves when it comes to their healthcare. I'm now going to play you another film. This one is an athlete in Australia called Ruby, who speaks very much to her own experiences within healthcare, and I think offers some really interesting insights as to what healthcare means to her.
Anyone can be an advocate. It's actually quite easy. It's about encouraging other people to do their best, not just other people, yourself as well. I've had to find ways to look after myself because growing up I had multiple health issues. I used to be really nervous and didn't really want to speak up because I was afraid that people wouldn't understand. Doctors would dismiss me and say things like, "Oh well, we'll get to that, or come back next time." I had to become more confident and learn to speak up for myself. It wasn't a quick process. It took a long time to find the right doctors that would listen to what I feel and need. I started swimming at a young age because it would be good for my joints and it would make me stronger. In order for me to be independent, I have to keep moving because if I stop, I end up in a wheelchair and that's not where I want to be. I think it's important to have dreams and goals, to keep pushing myself towards things. Because I still love to swim and I keep training and challenging myself by joining competitions. I love seeing people succeed. It's great to see people achieve things they didn't think they could do. Everybody has the power to do what they want to do, even if it's hard. Get out there and give it a go.
So with Ruby's presentation there, she talks very much about not only about healthcare, but about the importance of physical and mental well-being. Obviously, that is very much related to health and healthcare, but we also see that as a very important part of inclusive sport, and before that, inclusive play. And that's why I really wanted to talk about what inclusive play stands for in Special Olympics. It's around early childhood development and young athletes. We know that children from the age of 0 through to 7, that is an incredibly critical part of their learning journey, their cognitive development and physical development as well. So with young athletes, what we do is actually create a learning environment, a play environment for people with intellectual disabilities, but create it in such a way that it is inclusive in its context. With that, what that allows us to do is to provide 3 focus areas for people with intellectual disabilities to learn alongside people without children without intellectual disabilities. So you're bringing them into a play environment which stimulates them cognitively alongside children without intellectual disabilities. It allows them to improve their focus and concentration, and it strengthens inclusion and fosters an acceptance and understanding that would otherwise not take place. It would be fine for them to be able to develop those play in a play environment just with children with other children with special needs. But at the same time, the opportunity to actually develop to your full potential is around being in an environment where you maximize that. So being around children without intellectual disabilities actually will stimulate the child with intellectual disabilities further. and make those children without intellectual disabilities avoid developing stereotypes and having stigma around children that are different. With that, we know that we can create an inclusive environment that is valuable to all. I'm now going to show you another film, and I know I have a lot of films today, but these are incredibly valuable to us in being able to record and be able to demonstrate exactly what Special Olympics means. This one is a short film on our Young Athletes program.
Young Athletes is an important component of our national program in Thailand. In the past 3 years, we have been able to expand this program to 75 out of 77 provinces nationwide.
เอกลักษณ์ของกีฬาอนุชนเนี่ยนะคะเด็กๆเนี่ยสามารถที่ว่าจะมีส่วนร่วมในการคิดมีส่วนร่วมในการทำกิจกรรม
เอาอุปกรณ์ที่มีอยู่ในห้องอะค่ะเหมือนขวดน้ำที่เหลือใช้แบบนี้เรามาใส่น้ำเราเอามาวางแล้วก็เราสามารถให้เด็กใช้ดัดแปลงได้ค่ะหลังจากที่พาน้องเข้ามาร่วมกิจกรรมนะคะคุณแม่ก็เห็นว่าน้องเนี่ยสามารถอยู่กับคนอื่นได้มากขึ้นความประทับใจในโครงการนี้นะคะก็คือเด็กพิเศษในห้องเรียนนะคะมีพัฒนาการที่ดีขึ้นเหมือนน้องฟ้าใสอะค่ะเมื่อก่อนน้องฟ้าใสเป็นคนที่เงียบไม่พูดแต่ตอนนี้น้องฟ้าใสพูดเป็นประโยคได้แล้วค่ะ
เมื่อก่อนน้องตั้งแต่เกิดมาก็เป็นโรคหัวใจรั่ว2 รูกินยาอยู่ประมาณสัก2 ปีกว่าแต่น้องออกกำลังกายวิ่งเล่นทุกวันเป็นประจำหลังจากนั้นไม่ได้กินยามาเกือบ3 ปีแล้วนับ1 ถึง 10ไม่ค่อยได้แต่ทุกวันนี้นับได้ตั้งแต่หลังจากเข้าโครงการนี้มาแล้วแล้วก็พูดภาษาอังกฤษได้เป็นบางคำ
Thank you อย่างเดียว
Thank you
Young Athletes gives families a ray of hope because they have probably seen a life of uncertainties and now seeing what the child is capable of achieving.
My ultimate goal would be that one day we would have a Special Olympics athlete representing Thailand in the World Games who was first introduced to the movement through Young Athletes program.
And so Young Athletes really does play a very critical role in bringing people with and without intellectual disabilities together. Allowing children to play in that inclusive environment allows all of the children to develop new skills. It's really about being able to offer every child a chance to be able to fulfill their full potential, and at the same time making sure that discrimination and that preconceived idea about what others can and can't do is something that is avoided. So with that in mind, it brings me on to inclusive education, because really within an inclusive setting, within the school environment, that is something that is also incredibly important. Now, what we know is that students with intellectual disabilities are 43% more likely to be out of school, 49% are more likely to have never attended school, and 42% are less likely to have any foundational reading and numeracy skills. Beyond that, bullying is something that a lot of people with intellectual disabilities face. And these are often huge barriers to them attending school. And then moving on to meeting their full potential in a wider environment. So within Special Olympics, we offer Special Olympics Unified Sports. That is where we bring people with and without intellectual disabilities together to play sports. Now, the benefits of that I've already gone over as part of our inclusive play component. But the added dimension here is that we're really looking at the preconceived ideas that people will establish at a later stage in life beyond childhood. And with that, we see that being able to talk to how Special Olympics Unified Sports provides a competitive environment where everyone's skills are embraced and celebrated really does allow us to address some of those preconceived notions. Similarly, and building on unified sports is unified schools. And this is where we take that unified sports model and put it into a co-curricular setting within a school. So you're looking at creating an environment where unified sports is a catalyst almost to inclusion within a school setting, where children with and without intellectual disabilities are given the opportunity to play with each other, work with each other, and then really look at how leadership within that school and empowering themselves to look at inclusion themselves is something they can do. Now, we have initiated Special Olympics unified schools and unified champion schools in over 30,000 schools in 150 countries worldwide. Our indications so far are that 95% of the schools report that that this type of programming creates a more inclusive school environment. 85% say that they have had benefits in terms of emotional and attitudinal views of each other. And then students participating demonstrate a significantly improved attitude towards not only their peers with ID, but also with regard to what social inclusion is as an ideology. This is a story now from Papua New Guinea. We have an advocate there, Pauline, who speaks very clearly about what education means to her, the importance of it for her, and how she herself has had to address it.
I think that everyone deserves to go to school to learn. In my old school, there was a bully. I told my teacher about it, but they didn't do anything, so I left school. I needed a different environment where I am comfortable because I want to continue learning and finishing my school. I joined an open learning school so I can study on my own time and learn at my own pace. I work at Special Olympics PNG office in accounting and admin. I first joined Special Olympics as an athlete, but now I am also a youth leader and I go to different schools to share my story. The journey has been great for me. I became more confident and found the courage to speak up. When I speak at schools, others who are also bullied come to talk to me. I always encourage them and tell them not to give up. Teachers hearing my story do not know they have students with ID. They ask for resources so they can take better care of their students. Teachers also tell bullies to stop. People need to know we all learn differently and people need a choice to learn at their own pace. That's why I'll keep sharing my stories.
I really like what Pauline says in that film because I think it speaks very much to what people with intellectual disabilities often face. What is disappointing is that she had to go out of her school system in order to be able to pursue her education. But as part of that, knowing that she goes back into into the school setting to actually talk to other children, to actually provide them with an opportunity to understand what it means to be in an inclusive setting and how that can benefit everybody is something I think is incredibly incredibly warming. And it speaks very much to the final part of what I wanted to say today. And it speaks about engaging with the community. It speaks to the idea that what we are trying to do here is really provide a platform for people with intellectual disabilities to be included within a setting, within any setting, and therefore within the community and society. And for us, and as you've seen through all of the films that I've shown today, this is really about providing people with intellectual disabilities with a voice. It's about giving them the opportunity to speak very much to things that are important to them, whether that be quality education, good health and well-being, whether it be reducing inequalities, or indeed any of the SDGs that are important to them and their community. What I really want to stress, though, is that it can't stop at them advocating for themselves. It really does need to involve people without intellectual disabilities embracing what they have to say and learning how to be able to communicate most effectively and create a dialogue with people with intellectual disabilities as well. With that in mind, I wanted to show my final film today. And this is around Daki, who's an athlete from the Philippines, who now works in a prestigious bank in the country.
Some of the things I love the most these days are my job and, of course, basketball. I work in HR. The best part of my job is that I am able to influence the future of others like me. So what it's like to work with me? I have a unique way of thinking and structuring ideas. Like everyone else, I ask for help when I needed to. I have a manager who mentors me and helpful co-workers as well. We're a team, both at work and on the court. When I was younger, sports taught me discipline and training, and I found a place that made me feel part of something bigger. It was being an athlete with Special Olympics, where I decided to use my voice to close the gap between people with intellectual disabilities and those without. Some managers still see our disability first without seeing our ability, but I keep pushing myself and working towards my dream. I already have some great ideas to start my own e-commerce business one day. To all the naysayers out there, you're missing out by overlooking us. We are more than capable.
And that brings me to the end of my presentation. So I really want to just say thank you again. And as I've said, whether it be inclusive sport or inclusive play, inclusive healthcare or education, there is a space for everybody really to be looking at how this can be a wonderful fit for reducing inequalities. So I really appreciate everyone's time, and certainly I do recognize there were a lot of films in there. I do hope they've been enjoyable to you, and this has been informative. Happy to take any questions at all.
Thank you, Deepak. Thanks a lot. And on behalf of the people and audience who are here and not here around the world, we would like to thank Special Olympics, colleagues, friends, coaches, teachers, for doing this for us for 4-5 decades. And you and your colleagues at Special Olympics, wherever they are really sending us the message, a very clear message, that we should not missing millions. And we today now, we really witness there are pathways that we can really not help, but empower and build capacities of the people who are really, they are special in different ways. We also special people for them. So actually we are equal, and really making this, to see what is the real thing happening, to, our attempts to really address to the social inclusions and also the inequalities in our global societies. So thank you very much. And AIT and even, my colleagues, my networks, we used to work, we also working with the Special Olympics communities and colleagues in many activities and projects. We really appreciate the effort that we are doing. And also we want to say that we should work with you and keep on doing this so that we are really creating the very strong social inclusivities, within the next 6 years, 2030s, and beyond that. So thank you very much for that. So we really touched with your video also. We enjoyed the video. At the same time, I believe that the audience there also learn about the video. We have a couple of questions there, but I will not ask the question yet, but I would like to say this one because it's really important for us to register this one, to register that there are also the space for us to contribute as the institutions, as individuals, as the communities in the regions, in the world. They are the space for us to do more research, to explore more, because we know that there are people in the US, there are people in European countries and Australia and other countries. They're also doing a lot of research on this already to address different topics, different aspects, different issues in order to strengthen understanding of the ID children and also social inclusion factors and so on and so forth. So this is very important. And third, and last but not the least, is also to really integrate. I believe so. Deepak, is really integrate the effort. It is institutional integrations, the governments, the non-governmental organization, the private sectors, the civil society organization, family, and everybody to really have work together. As shown in your video, it's very clear that we need a collective effort, and that actually very important for achieving this one. So we have a couple of questions on this.
Mr. Chalasin, if I may, I'll just respond to some of that, if that's okay, just to elaborate a little bit as well. Certainly, what you say about the need for us to be able to address the needs of people with intellectual disabilities, absolutely. I think you've really summed up very much what our work is. What I hope that we are demonstrating as well is that this approach to inclusion is something that covers all aspects of what being an inclusive, a diverse and inclusive society is. In the end, we know that diversity can really provide huge benefits to any society simply from the range of perspectives that can make a difference in any community. Now, if you put that alongside the idea that if a community is marginalized and they have a voice, you are able to then activate that community by empowering them, they can then make a positive contribution just like anybody else. It's about finding the right medium for that. In addition, what you say about the research that is taking place around the world, I would say categorically that there is still a very disparate approach towards research in this area. Much of the statistics that we have available to us right now is guided from Western countries. We have some evidence here of some of the things that are happening, and certainly we are collecting data, but the data is very disparate. It occurs in different spaces. Being able to consolidate that and have a consolidated effort towards introducing the world to what intellectual disability means in Asia Pacific is incredibly important. So I just thought I'd just add those two comments there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we have the first questions is that, how we can really join with the Special Olympics to contribute to these, Special Olympics activities. What is the approach that organization like us, join the Special Olympics? What are the ways that we can do so?
Absolutely, and we'd be so glad to be able to partner with any agencies that are willing to look at inclusion in a very wide lens as we do. Essentially, Special Olympics operates in a federated model. We're a sports organization at its heart, and within that, every country has an independent Special Olympics country program. So what we would do at Special Olympics Asia Pacific level is be able to introduce our organizations, any potential partners to our organizations on the ground and demonstrate that how we could work together through that. Obviously, a lot of the work that we speak about at the regional level is about creating alignment across the work. And we hope that partners would be able to engage with us there. Now, I did share my QR code at the beginning of the presentation. I'm sure, Mr. Chonlasin, if it would be okay to ask that my contact details be shared with others, and I'd be happy for them to reach out if they do want to partner with any of the organizations in the Asia Pacific region, and we'll certainly look towards introducing in the right way.
Of course, we have no issue with that. And actually, audience, you can hear from the park that, the Special Olympics Asia Pacific also had the country's office. So maybe that is the first contact points that if you would like to know what are the activities going on, what are the link up and so on and so forth. So that is something that you might be able to explore the opportunity of working with the, with the group of the people who are really enhance the abilities and also mental abilities, learning abilities through sports and, the fun to play events there. The second question is, Deepak, I mean, from your point of view, from the Special Olympics point of view, or from your, so to say, applied research, from your experience, what is the most important considerations when we are looking at the inclusions? What are the main factors when we are looking at the social inclusion, or if we want to strengthen the inclusiveness?
So I think that there are two components to this, which I'll start with the first being the personal one. And I think that is very much about each individual being very much aware of their own personal bias and prejudices. It is incredibly difficult to maintain an inclusive mindset if you don't first address the mindset within yourself. You can't really tackle the prejudices without identifying them first. And many of us all still do have prejudices, and we should be acknowledging that. So by that, I mean, even myself, at times I will enter a meeting and not acknowledge that someone may well need me to speak slower, or indeed repeat some of the things that I'm saying, or take a different approach to actually communicating with them. And I think that type of error is something that we need to be able to see in ourselves first. Now, from a wider standpoint, from probably a more institutional standpoint, I think that there's so much that we need to do in terms of changing policy. There was something I did want to share, but obviously with the time frame, I felt perhaps it would be good. So I'm very glad that people have asked. But in terms of inclusive education policies within the region, we're not seeing governments take those inclusive education policies up as much as we are seeing in other parts of the world. I think it's something like 6% of the nations in our region have taken it up. Now, with that, policy is only one step, but it's a significant step to being able to see things like the Sustainable Development Goals and the CRPD come to fruition. And beyond that, agencies such as Special Olympics in country and the other agencies that are represented on this call are in a position then to be able to take inclusion forward, empowered by the policy that is in place. So I'd say that would be an important factor in really sort of seeing inclusion come to fruition in the future.
Thank you very much. And just to supplement to your comment, this one, just to give you a further queries in regarding to your comments on these questions. Do you mean that, what are the options? Is that has to be formal education, or it can be non-formal education, informal? What are the settings that you would see a good entry point for this one? Anything at all that you would recommend?
I would recommend, I certainly recognize that the spectrum of stigma, prejudice, or bias, as it were, that takes place in our region is significant, as well as the access to infrastructure more generally for wider populations, let alone marginalized communities. So for me, I would really recommend that what we do is look at simple avenues such as sport as being ways to bring people together within a school setting, within even a healthcare, a medical college, or in where healthcare professionals are being trained. And you put that sport environment, a play environment together, which allows people to recognize each other's differences. That then allows for stronger inclusion to take place more naturally. So for me, I would say that it's about creating experiences between people with and without intellectual disabilities or from different communities or more generally. And that would then foster this level of inclusion in the right way. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have a hard and strong model because we are so different.
Right. So it could be very flexible models that we can also apply to different settings of the countries. And further than that, with regard to, you mentioned about healthcare, you mentioned about education, and you mentioned about the sports. And as I understand that, in the Western world, in the US, Australia, and in the developing world, in the developing world, maybe the readiness in terms of the organization setting is more than the Asia Pacific. For example, in Thailand or maybe nearby countries to Thailand, especially the different ministry and department, they are not working very much, in the integration there. So do you see this is also one of the challenge that the integration of healthcare, education, and also the, sport may be something that may be very difficult or something that we can resolve?
I think it is a challenge. At the same time, I would say that there is so much opportunity in being able to celebrate success through sport. It goes back to those initial traits that I mentioned around what sport can give to any individual. It's part of the human condition to be competitive or indeed want to celebrate skill and prowess. And so for me, I think that the idea that we create inclusion through sport really offers an avenue for countries to start to celebrate what it is to be inclusive. It does mean a change in perspective on what sport stands for. There is incredible recognition, I think, for high performance sport. And I think that should be applauded. It is incredible. However, at the same time, when people have so many significant challenges in their lives, and yet they can still do something such as Sana did in that video from Pakistan, I think that there is so much to be said about what communities can do through sport that you can rally behind that. And that's where I think governments and institutions can really, they can really benefit from what inclusion stands for and what inclusive sport, for that matter, stands for.
Yes, that is very interesting. Actually, both sides, creating each another opportunity. So I like your comment that is actually this is the inclusive sport, the unified sport can create the opportunity for the agencies and also organization to work together.
Absolutely.
Yes, and can you also give some experience whether is this happening? For example, there is some best practice or case study that happening in other places where the Special Olympics and also the activities that they are doing can also step by step changing the way that the agencies and government and policy is working. Can you raise an example and also the approach that they did that?
Sure. We actually are putting together something called the Global Coalition of Inclusion. And this is where countries, governments are signing up to a commitment towards inclusive education. We've seen tremendous success outside of the Asia Pacific region for the time being. Really looking at what inclusion looks like through unified school programming, unified sports, and so forth, and governments committing to being able to do that across the world. Certainly, there are countries such as Egypt, China, and so forth that have already signed up to that. Within our Asia Pacific region and Southeast Asia, we're still to sign someone up for, sign some of the governments up for that.
Right. Perhaps this is the last question from my side. I think we don't have any more questions from the audience. The last question from the audience already addressed the previous questions to Deepak. So perhaps my last questions to everybody or to the technologists may be, how do you see the artificial intelligence and digital transformations can be applied into, these activities that are piloted and also experienced by Special Olympics? Any role of the digital transformations and AI technologies can be part of that?
Yeah, there's a huge well, there's so much in this space which is incredibly relevant to not only Special Olympics but people with intellectual disabilities and their lives. I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation how people with intellectual disabilities often find it difficult to process information and so forth. The development of AI and digital technology to help us to address the learning process for people with intellectual disabilities, to slow information down, break it up into to smaller parts, is something we need to explore. At the same time, during COVID, we explored to a large extent how much information there was that was being transmitted out about what COVID was or how to address COVID. And we found that people with intellectual disabilities were incredibly overwhelmed by the level of different information that they were receiving. And so we did our very best to filter that through something called Access Easy English and offer that in a digital context through mobile phones. That type of technological approach to being able to support people with intellectual disabilities is something we need to do. On a wider note than that, Special Olympics was incredibly badly hit by COVID in terms of being able to access our athletes during COVID. So much of our work was done indirectly through agencies and partners on the ground and not directly with athletes that we had recorded or registered within our own systems. And it demonstrated to us that digital technology has a huge role to play in being able to collect data, be able to process and analyze that data to better support people with intellectual disabilities. And that's a huge focus for my office at the moment as we look to roll out a Special Olympics registration tool to be able for different country programs to use and therefore be able to support our athletes more effectively.
Audience, thank you very much. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your participation until now, until this time. And also please answer the feedback questionnaire. So we have a kind of survey the feedback of our events from AIT Extension and Special Olympics and CIFAL Bangkok. Deepak, big hug from us. Hug from us. And also please take the hug from us to all the members of Special Olympics around the world and also to those ID students that we love them a lot. Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, and audience, hope to see you again in the next event. Until then, bye-bye for now. Deepak, bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.